officially out on Saturday, so he will not play. That's a big deal. I mean, I know we talked about that going into the Purdue game, and you could argue that it wouldn't have made a difference. However, you'd have to think, as stubborn as Phil Parker was during that Purdue game, you would have to think that having that extra body back there who you have, I mean, you know that Phil Parker has tons of trust in Riley Moss. You'd have to think that would have at least given him another tool in the toolbox to try to offset what David Bell was doing. I don't know how much Phil would have thrown Riley on David, and certainly Riley has gotten burned by Bell in past seasons. But now you have just another week where Terry Roberts is your the next guy in. I don't know that it'll make that big of a difference. Certainly, Wisconsin's passing attack is not what Purdue's is. They threw the ball 8 times last week against Purdue. I don't know that I told Don on Sunday during our live show. I said, I don't know that I've ever seen a stat line like that where you're essentially blowing another team out. You win by 3 scores. And of course, most of those, the separation occurred in the second half, Mark. But to do it with your quarterback throwing for like 50 yards on 8 pass attempts, have you ever seen a stat line like that at this level?
Well, let's discount the military academies, put them to the side, of course.
Yeah.
Other than that, in Georgia Tech, I know that I have at some point, maybe going back to Oklahoma, Nebraska, those teams in the mid 80s. Yeah, it's rare. There's no question it's rare. And I watched probably half that game, not in one block, but back and forth, and then went back and to see the 5 for 8 performance for 50 yards, and just to realize that they ran the ball, I think 51 times, threw it 8. That
that's just a ridiculous number.
30 points.
Yeah, they scored 30. And you brought up the military academies, and then of course Georgia Tech. All those teams typically have a quarterback that runs. I mean, you don't typically have a quarterback like Mertz who's just handing the ball off that many times. If you're Wisconsin, if you run the ball effectively against Iowa's defense, there's a darn good chance they're going to win this football game because, let's be honest, Iowa's offense is what it is. I'm hoping, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, I'm hopeful that the tackles can progress, that the interior of the line is healthy now. It sounds like Cody Ince, according to Kirk today, Cody Ince will be returning. I anticipate him to take the majority of the snaps at right guard, which Connor Colby basically, along with Justin Britt, took the brunt of those snaps a week and a half ago. They need Cody back there. Remember, Cody was essential to them running the football well last season. I don't know that he's played great, but again, he's dealt with injuries, as has Kyler Schott. So you get Cody back. Kyler Schott's, I would have to think he's close to 100% now, even taking into account getting back up to game speed. And of course, Tyler Linderbaum has managed to stay healthy, which is, I don't want to say it's a miracle, but that's tremendous because he's playing 100% of their snaps, and rightfully so. But they're not going to get bigger, faster, stronger midseason. They're not going to do that during a bye week. Raymond Brathwaite's not got him in there, 18 hours of the day in the weight room. So it is what it is. I think Iowa's got an opportunity to get the ball downfield. Wisconsin's defense, as I understand it, and you've probably watched more Wisconsin football than I have, Mark, but if there's any weakness in that defense, it's likely the secondary. Now, you may sit here and say, well, it doesn't matter when you're getting the type of pass rush that they get on opposing quarterbacks, and that's true, especially when you weigh Iowa's inability to protect Spencer Petras. Can he get the ball out of the pocket effectively? I guess that's up for debate. And that might be, therein lies the key. Can you protect Spencer Petras enough to where he can get the ball downfield? I predicted on my podcast, which was recorded today, will be released later this evening. I predict that Keagan Johnson will have a huge role this Saturday in Iowa's game plan. I've kind of noticed a trend with Kirk, and I've talked about his stubbornness, Mark, over the years, not just with the defense, and certainly Phil Parker has been great, but he was stubborn against Purdue. But with the offense especially, Iowa doesn't change a whole lot up. That's just Iowa football. I'd like to see certain things change, especially from Brian Ferentz and play calling. But one thing that I've noticed is that over the years, you'll get you kind of learn where to read between the lines when Kirk is speaking. And he made a point, I believe it was a week ago, it might have been after the Purdue game, post game, that we got to get Keagan Johnson involved more. And sometimes that's not good because I'm sure opposing staffs are picking up on those things too. But usually when he makes comments like that, as opposed to just, a generic, well, he's a good football player, he's coming along. When he makes comments like that, usually you see a concerted effort to get that individual the ball. And as dynamic as Keagan has been, I could see some quick slants, some quick passes to him early in this game. I would love to say, Tyrone Tracy's another guy who I think needs to have a big game. He had an 80-some yard catch against Wisconsin 2 years ago up there in Madison. Was actually the last player from Iowa to score a touchdown at Wisconsin. So maybe that gives him a little bit of ambition in this game. And then, of course, Sam Laporta. We saw the Purdue tight end, whose name escapes me at the moment, rack up over 100 yards last week against Wisconsin. So as much as Purdue struggled offensively, they had a tight end that went for over 110 yards. So maybe Sam Laporta with Luke Lachey back. It sounds like, Kirk Ferentz made a statement today. It sounds like Lachey will be back. So they get Lachey, they get Ince back, they lose Moss again, and it sounds like Deontay Craig on the defensive line will miss again, likely. He didn't 100% rule him out, but he, I believe, said he was doubtful.